record to the computer. All right, Kim Stair, welcome. Kim Stair Wallace, welcome very much. Thank you very much for joining us at the Glunz Tasting Hall, and we are super excited to have you. I actually have a fabulous little virtual background that I have to, of course, put on here for our visit with Dry Creek Vineyards here. I always forget which way I have to go. But this is, when you go to visit Dry Creek, you are welcomed by this beautiful view. And thank you very much for coming. You have an outstanding story to tell with an absolutely fabulous family. And I am not going to hold you up. Kim Stair Wallace, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, everybody. I'm super happy to be here. It's not going to be the same as being in Chicago at the Glunz tasting, but I'll try to do my best to make it similar. And if you can't hear me, just let me know or let Joe know. We were having a little problem with the audio a minute ago, but I'm trying to speak loudly. So anyway, so as Joe said, my name is Kim Stair Wallace. I'm the second generation owner of our family winery, Dry Creek Vineyard. And I am really proud to be, I think, what is becoming a true rarity in our industry today. And that is that we are one of the few remaining iconic legacy family-owned wineries from the illustrious class of 72, consistently making 90-plus point wines. And it's just something I'm super, super proud of. We just started our 49th harvest, believe it or not. And I've got my eyes set on our 50th anniversary, which is just in 2 short years away. And so, you know, I think one of the things, there's a lot of things that make us very unique, but one of them, of course, is our family ownership, our authenticity, and really our complete and total devotion to producing world-class wines. So anybody that knows me well, Sarah is upstairs in her office, and I think John Doxson is maybe somewhere on this call as well. He's our sales director. They know that I have a personal mantra of no compromising. I will not dumb down our brand. I am in this to make world-class wines and to make wines that are enjoyable and have longevity, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll tell you a little bit about our history, and then I'll tell you about kind of where we are today. And if anybody has any questions, is the chat feature enabled, Sarah? I guess it is. Maybe throw up some questions. But anyway, so history, background. My parents started the winery in 1972. My family was originally from the Boston area, and my dad got bitten by the wine bug when he was at MIT. He was a civil engineer, and he always jokes that he was in charge of the beverages for his fraternity. And I don't think they were drinking really very good wines, but it piqued his interest. And he went on to get an MBA actually from Northwestern in Chicago, and then moved our family when I was 4 years old to Germany. And he got a job in Germany for a year or two. And it was in Europe that he really started to become interested in wine. He spent a lot of time, obviously, in Germany, but also in the Loire Valley of France. When my parents came back to the United States in the late 60s, Dad read an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was like 1968, about the future of the California wine business. And he basically convinced my mom that they should do a complete about-face, sell everything, load the kids in the car, and drive across the country. And he enrolled as a graduate student at UC Davis. So after that venture, I remember really vividly my parents, spending a lot of time on the weekends looking for properties, because after he got his enology degree, the next step was finding a location to start our winery. And we toured places in Napa, places in Sonoma, even up in Mendocino County. And eventually they stumbled across a very rundown, sleepy, kind of neglected valley called the Dry Creek Valley. And on a handshake deal, my father bought a 55-acre rundown prune orchard. And it was a very bold and daring move. And it kind of shook up the whole community. This photograph that Sarah just put up is actually from the original groundbreaking ceremony. And you can see that's me turning over the first shovelful of dirt right in front of the winery. The building is our original building. It's still the main building. In fact, it's right behind me. I'm standing in our tasting room, and on the other side is our cellar, which is what that building is. But basically, my father tore out those prune orchards and planted the region's first grapevines after Prohibition. What did he plant? Well, he planted a number of varietals, but he focused on Sauvignon Blanc. And in fact, he was the first to plant Sauvignon Blanc first to release a Fumé Blanc back in 1972, which of course we'll be tasting. And, you know, really is credited with the renaissance in wine growing here in Sonoma County and of course here in Dry Creek Valley. So we have quite a story, and it's, you know, I'm really proud of it. And I invite all of you to come visit at some point when we can all travel again. Anyway, over the years, we've been credited with many historic firsts. I mentioned a few of them already, but we're also known as the first winery to coin the term old vine for our Old Vine Zinfandel, which is a wine we make from vines over the age of 100 years old. We were actually the first to advocate for Bordeaux-style blending in this industry, and we were the first to use the term meritage. And in fact, the two Bordeaux-style wines we're tasting today are very indicative of our approach with Cabernet and with the Bordeaux wines, because we've always produced a blend. We were the first to develop really in our area an aggressive program in sustainable agriculture. We are 100% certified sustainable. So anyway, I could go on and on. The point is lots of historic firsts. But I want to kind of shift a little bit. So I grew up at this winery. I worked here as a teenager. I swore I'd never work here as an adult. But I don't know if any of you come from a family business. You know, it kind of gets in your blood. And I came back to work here in my mid-20s. But you can see in this photograph, I'm on the left. I think I was about 13 years old, and I'm in the what was our original tasting room, taking orders. I love the picture because on the wall you can see the rotary phone, and right above my head is a calendar with a sailboat on it. And if you know Dry Creek, you know we feature sailboats on our labels and that we are passionate about sailing. And then on the right is my photograph of my husband and I, actually at our engagement party, which we had right here at the winery outside my office doors. So this is truly a hands-on family-owned business. I've worked here my entire adult life. I took over in 2011 as president, and my father actually retired back in 2006. So this is kind of where the story shifts a little bit. And maybe, I don't know what photographs you've got lined up, Sarah, but I just want to talk a little bit about the second generation vision. So as many of you know, our industry has gone through a massive, what I consider kind of I call it frankly the homogenization of the wine industry, but it's really been the kind of corporatization of the wine industry as these big companies have been buying wineries, you know, left and right, really for the last 2 decades. And so when my dad was looking at retirement, and my husband and I were looking at what we wanted to do to really sort of shape the winery in our vision, we began a major reinvention of our winery. And my father had grown the winery quite large. We had vineyards throughout the entire county, and it didn't make sense to us. We felt very strongly that we are the flagship winery of Dry Creek Valley. We put this area on the map. We should be terroir-focused, appellation-driven, focusing on the Dry Creek Valley, and do whatever it takes to make wines of distinction that really stand out in the marketplace. And so we began over the last, it's really been about 15 years now, reinventing. And what that really means is investing in new techniques, new equipment, new barrels, new talent, new vineyards. We made a major shift in selling off vineyards that we had in other parts of the county, invested in Dry Creek Valley. And, you know, I think that it's sort of counterintuitive to what I see happening in our industry, which is where wineries of our ilk and of our size are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're making decisions to lower their input costs. So for example, our Fumé Blanc, which we're going to taste in a minute, I would say the vast majority of wines in that price category have gone to either a California appellation or a North Coast appellation. Now, I'm not saying those wines are bad, but what they're trying to do is broaden the area or region that they are sourcing vineyards from, sourcing grapes from, to lower their input costs. We are doing the complete opposite. We are going into our vineyards and in some cases sections within sections or blocks within vineyards and kind of micro harvesting and really kind of drilling down to the terroir of Dry Creek Valley and our particular region. So it's just a little bit of a different approach. I think it served us well because I can proudly boast that this is like having children, right? I'm sure some of you have kids and you always, it's okay to brag about your kids. I feel like it's okay to brag about our winery because we were picked one of the top 100 wineries in the world a couple years ago by Wine and Spirits magazine, and we made the Wine Spectator's top 100 list just this past year. So I think we're doing something right. Anyway, last thing I want to just share is a little bit about Dry Creek Valley. So if you have not come to our gorgeous valley, and yes, it's still beautiful, it did not burn down. Let me repeat, it did not burn down. And in fact, you can't even see where the fires were, thankfully. I sort of digress here, but I'm sure some of you are curious about the fires. They were located in the far western, rugged, very kind of mountainous area to the west of us. And that's primarily all timberland. And not to diminish the severity of the fire, but it's really important to notice or to note that it didn't come into the Dry Creek Valley. None of our vineyards or our family or our employees and the winery and my home, which is right next door, were directly impacted by the fires. You know, it was pretty hard from an emotional standpoint. It was definitely, you know, concerning and worrisome, but we fared very well and we remain very optimistic about this harvest. We've brought in, I think 5. We just started picking last Wednesday. We've harvested 5 Sauvignon Blanc vineyards. We are testing every single vineyard, but nothing has come back positive. And, you know, we still remain optimistic about the vintage. So I think there's too much doom and gloom. And of course, the media likes to portray things in a very severe way, but I'm very optimistic. Anyway, back to Dry Creek Valley. So we are about 70 miles north of San Francisco. And it is a warmish climate, but very heavily influenced by the Pacific Ocean and the marine layer. So typical summer weather, you know, it'll be quite hot in the day, 80, 90 degrees. Maybe you can throw up some pictures, Sarah. And it'll be warm, but then that fog comes in every day and cools those grapes down. And you know, at nighttime, our temperatures are in the mid 50s, you know, 60s. So we will easily have a 30-degree drop in temperature every single day. And this allows for the grapes to hang for a long time and have a nice long, slow maturation period. It's really ideal for the varietals that we specialize in. We do produce a little bit of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but we do grow that in Russian River Valley, which is south of us, and it's a much cooler climate. So let's go ahead and taste. Does that sound good? Yeah, okay, I got a thumbs up. So Chenin Blanc. Now this is one of my personal favorites and is definitely something to really celebrate. It's the first wine, I think, in your kit. I'm just gonna change the view here so I can, hold on, whoops. Yeah, all right, I'm feeling better. I can see more of you. All right, so Chenin Blanc, believe it or not, we've made a Chenin Blanc, a dry style Chenin, every single vintage since 1972. No other winery.
I apologize. We're going to do the Chenin Blanc first, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great.
So no other winery has produced, well, this year it'll be 49 consecutive vintages. And again, this is a wine that reflects my father's real passion for the Loire Valley. So we've always traditionally produced it in a dry style. The residual is 0.4%. So when you're under 1%, it's basically below the threshold of sweetness. So it drinks dry, but there is a tiny bit of residual sugar. It is, hang on one sec. Let me just, by the way, just so you know, it's a little early for me to be drinking Chenin, but we do consider Chenin a breakfast wine here. I know it's more of a mid-morning wine for you guys. Anyway, it's non-oak aged. We don't add any other varietals into it. So, you know, there are some Chenins in the market where they're blending in Viognier, et cetera, or in fact, they're even oak aging it. This is stainless steel fermented, 100% dry Chenin Blanc. And it actually is from the Clarksburg area, which is just to the east of us in the Sacramento Delta. So this is the only wine that I produce that the grapes aren't grown right here at the winery. Now, why is that? Well, about 30 plus years ago, we formed a partnership with a family over in Clarksburg, and my father did business, you know, basically did business with the son, and now I'm doing business with the son. I mean, my father did business with the father, and the Chenin Blancs that were grown in this area were eventually replaced by essentially higher, more profitable grape varieties, and Chenin Blanc was replanted over in the Clarksburg area because it's a very well-drained, kind of breezy, temperate climate, and it seems to just be perfect for Chenin. You know, I've asked our winemaker, Tim Bell, a million times, why does he think Chenin grows so well? And we all kind of shake our head, and the truth is we aren't 100% sure, other than the climate seems to be ideal for it. And Chenin Blanc in this area, I mean, the land values are just so expensive here that people stopped planting Chenin years ago. But anyway, so it's 100% Clarksburg, has been for, as I said, at least 30 years, if not longer. This wine also has the distinction of having been poured at the White House on several occasions. And this was a sort of a fun thing that Sarah and I just learned about recently. These are actually menus from 1985 when, oh my gosh, I just drew a blank. Who is the president? Help me out. I just drew a blank.
Yeah, it was 1975, so it was Gerald Ford.
What, did I say 85 or I meant 75? Ford. But then who was the second one, Sarah?
It was Ford and Carter was the second one.
Anyway, so our Chenin is very tropical, very aromatic, has a lot of kind of, pineapple, tropical aromas, a little bit of watermelon rind. Sometimes I even get a little bit of kiwi. So very tropical, very, super aromatic, but good acidity and lively on the palate. You know, this is not a cloying sweet wine. It actually is a wine that goes beautifully with all kinds of cuisines, any kind of Asian cuisine, Thai cuisine, you know, nice summer salads. And then of course the quintessential Chenin Blanc food product is oysters. And we have won the Pacific Coast Oyster Competition, which is a competition of a number of different restaurants that they select the top 10 wines in the world for oysters. And our Chenin was on that list for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years in a row. So we've done a lot of fun oyster parties. Sarah's the queen of oysters. She's done many seminars about oysters her time here. There's a nice subtle minerality to this wine too that I think really intrigues people. And what I love about our Chenin is just the versatility. I have met people that don't know anything about Chenin or about wine for that matter, and people that are highly educated somms, and everybody really, is drawn to this wine. So, all right.
Such a different Chenin Blanc than what people know of and understand from the last 15, 20 years in U.S. Chenin wine industry. I mean, it's just, they're not made like this domestically, and it's outstanding.
It is outstanding. I mean, I as I say, I love it. It's a family favorite. You know, it's incredibly reasonably priced. It just goes to show you that a really killer bottle of wine is available in a price point that, a lot of people can afford. Okay, Fumé Blanc. So this is really the heart and soul of the winery. And Sarah, I think you have some cool pictures of this as well. Let me just talk a little bit about Fumé Blanc. So when my dad started, as I was saying, he loved Sauvignon Blanc. That's what he planted. He loved Puy Fumé and Sancerre. And he vowed that when he would start the winery, this was the kind of style he wanted to make, or the kind of wine he wanted to make. When my husband Don and I took over, we vowed to not change this. This is one of the few wines that has not been completely reinvented here at the winery. Why do it, right? It's just been simply delicious for all these years. It is kind of the quintessential style of Sauvignon Blanc, and for decades it was considered before there were a lot of new producers, it really was considered sort of the hallmark, benchmark, if you will, Sauvignon Blanc in California. Our style really celebrates some of the grassier notes and some of the kind of more herbaceous sides of Sauvignon Blanc. We love that. We don't want it to be too much so, but we do celebrate that. So you're going to notice a lot of lovely citrus, a little bit of dried lemon peel. Let me just give it a swirl and a taste here. A little bit of kefir lime, a little bit of almost dried herbs, like Italian herbs, maybe a little subtle touch of bouquet garni, some of those herbs that you would see in a bouquet garni, which would be tarragon and basil and whatnot. Even a little bit of, I get a tiny bit, very subtle, but a little bit of rosemary, but again, in a very balanced way. So this again is very food friendly. We celebrate acidity at our winery. This is stainless steel fermented, non-oak aged. It's from a combination of vineyards that we have here in Dry Creek Valley and Russian River. So we have the nice combination of the cooler climate Sauvignon Blanc in Russian River, which gives us a little bit more of the edgy kind of grassier elements, if you will. And we also have the benefit of some of our estate vineyards here in Dry Creek Valley, which is a little warmer. And so those bring out some of the fruitier components, more of the citrus and whatnot. So I feel like it's just a really great example of a very beautifully made, well-balanced Sauvignon Blanc. Again, very food friendly, would go with any kind of cuisine, I think. I love it with anything with goat cheese, any kind of, also very nice with oysters, you know, any kind of, I love it with halibut. You know, I also love this with, believe it or not, pesto. I don't know if anybody has done any, so anything else on Sauvignon Blanc? Do you have any other pictures, Sarah? I'm feeling.
No, just the vineyards there, and then our historical, the 1972, if you want me to flash back to that.
Well, it's just, you don't need to do that. I just think I just feel like it's very significant when, you know, in our case, we've remained committed to this particular varietal in this style for almost 50 years. And I don't think a lot of people can really say that.
And in a year that Sancerre, you know, is harder to get, the tariffs included, and everybody loves this style. And it is a style your dad and you have been making from the get-go. And it's all started from that Sancerre style.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, Kim, you may want to bring up the new label. I know they have the small bottles in front of them, but when they see the full bottle in person.
That's a good idea. Thank you for reminding me. So I don't know if you guys can see this. I'm sure you can't read it, but we recently made a label redesign, and part of what you'll find if you read the label is we really want to showcase authenticity and the transparency of our product. We have nothing to hide here, okay? Nothing at all to hide. We aren't adding weird things to our wines. We aren't, you know, we know where every grape comes from. I mean, literally there's nothing, it's something to be proud of. And so it occurred to us that we should be a little bit more forthcoming with some of that information directly on the label. And so I redesigned the label a couple months ago. And in fact, we tell the customer that, you know, the wine, how it's made, what the flavor profile is, you know, that it's grown in our estate vineyards and from small local farms. We talk about the biodiversity and sustainability efforts of the winery. And then this is kind of a shocker. We went out on a limb and decided to really, to be, what's the word? To proudly share something that you probably know, and a lot of us in the industry kind of take it for granted, but a lot of consumers don't know, and it's important to them. And that is that the wine is gluten-free and vegan, and we practice minimal intervention. So we actually put that right on the label. And we've had some tremendous feedback, positive feedback so far. And I'd be very curious to hear how it's doing in Chicago, Joe. I mean, it was a bold move, I think, on our part. But yeah,
no, we love it. It's great. We loved when you kicked it off this spring. And actually the bottles, the small bottles that you've seen many times before, which I apologize with my fake background, you can't see it too much, but it actually has the new label on the small bottles. So if everybody's just looking at that, you can't really read it unless you have amazing eyes, but it is done on the laser printer, so it's pretty good quality.
Speaking of amazing eyes, I'm going to change glasses so I can see better.
So there is a question in the chat about why did we name it Fumé Blanc instead of Sauvignon Blanc?
Oh yeah, great question. So we named it Fumé Blanc because when Dad started in 1972, it was 4 years after Robert Mondavi had coined the term in Napa Valley, right? Mondavi coined the term Fumé Blanc in 1968. And when my father was trying to figure out how to release this wine and market it, he did some investigation and he learned that the term Fumé Blanc vastly outsold wines bottled under the name Sauvignon Blanc. And he loved Fruit Fumé. So we thought, hey, I'm going to call it Fumé Blanc. I mean, pretty simple reason. And we've stuck with it for all these years. Now, there's a lot of confusion with the term Fumé Blanc. Today, I think people sometimes assume that it is oak aged. It is not. In South Africa, if you label a wine Fumé Blanc, it does imply that it is oak aged. So there is some confusion around the term. It's, you know, it's a very traditional term that we've stayed with because we celebrate that kind of his legacy, meaning my dad's legacy. But we also produce a wine that we simply call Sauvignon Blanc, and that's slightly different style and whatnot. So we've stuck with the term mostly because of the history of the winery, and it's what people know of from Dry Creek Fumé Blanc. Okay, should we move in? Actually, I guess let me look. I can look at the chat features too. Any other questions? Okay. Sarah, you'll have to help me out on the questions. Okay.
So Perry was just noticing that the new label is informative.
Yes, it is very informative. If I could make it longer and wider, I would have put more information, but then my winemakers would have been really upset because it just makes it really hard on the bottling line. Okay, so Heritage Zinfandel. This is one of the sort of the true pride and joy, you know, of the winery in the sense that this is this wine comes originally from a vineyard my husband planted in the early 1990s. And the technique that we used was very, very groundbreaking at the time. And it's, again, one of those historic firsts that I was going to mention earlier. What we call it Heritage Vine Zinfandel because he took budwood from a very old pre-Prohibition vineyard, very famous vineyard that sadly is no longer producing. And we grafted it onto rootstock, planted it in our vineyard when we bought our property. We bought our property, which is directly behind the winery, in 1989. And it actually was planted to Zinfandel, but it was the old Davis clone, which is not a very good clone. So we tore that out and began collecting, you know, this old vine budwood, which was eventually grafted into the rootstock that we replanted when we replanted our vineyard. And the first vintage that we got was 1997. And because the whole purpose of it, everybody, was to really try to capture some of the heirloom characteristics, if you will, of old vine Zinfandel in a new planting before all the old vine Zinfandel vines are torn out or have died out. And so we wanted to try to see if we could, you know, replicate in a new young vineyard some of the things we love about old vine Zin. So beautiful briary fruit tones, blackberry, plum, some lovely spice, a little bit of white pepper, cardamom, all those things that we associate with old vine Zinfandel. And our propagation technique proved to be so successful that we have since done that process in a number of other estate wineries. And in fact, now it's a technique that has been adopted by many top viticulturalists of Zinfandel in our area. But it started with our winery, and that's why we call it Heritage Vine Zinfandel. So it's really, to sum it up, it's preserving the legacy of old vine Zinfandel vineyards in a newer planting. Now this vineyard, the primary vineyard is not so new. It's, you know, 25, 30 years old at this point. But we've had great success with this wine. So you probably know Dry Creek Valley was settled by the Italians in the late 1800s. They were the ones that brought Zinfandel here. So when my dad started, we produced Zinfandel every year since the early 1970s. But a lot of those great old Zinfandel vines have, you know, we've lost them. It's really sad. So this is an attempt to preserve those. From a winemaking standpoint, this is, sorry, I have to smell and taste at the same time. So this is very true to our style of Zinfandel. We always produce a blend very similar to the old field blends the Italians planted. So this happens to have a good dollop of Petit Syrah. It's 77% Zinfandel. And we also have a tiny amount of old vine Carignan in it. So it is a blend. We always do that. We always blend in a little bit of Petit Syrah for a little more structure and color. But this wine has lovely raspberry, blackberry, maybe a little bit of plumminess, a little bit of a blueberry characteristic, but not, they're bright fruits, okay? So they're bright and lively. This is a Zinfandel with a good level of acidity. You'll also notice if you smell it and swirl it that there's some lovely spice tones, as I mentioned, coriander, cardamom, maybe a little bit of cinnamon even. But I think one of the hallmarks of our heritage vine Zinfandel overall is just balance. You've got great acidity, great fruit, and you have moderate alcohol. We here at Dry Creek Vineyard do not believe in, or do we like, high alcohol wines, period. So we also really like acidity, and we like wines that age love beautifully. So this is one of the, a good example of our approach with Zinfandel. And I'm also often complimented because I think a lot of people, particularly towards the East Coast, they assume Zinfandel is going to be very, kind of jammy, high alcohol, cloying, sort of almost port-like. And certainly there is a style that some people like that's that, but that's not our approach. In our case, we prefer really the elegance of this wine. And again, we must be doing something right, because for the last 7 years in a row, we've received a 90 or 91 point score from Wine Spectator. And this is the wine that put us in the top 100 last year. And so something really to be proud of. Joe, you do pretty well with this wine, right? Lots of Chicagoans are drinking Zin.
We do pretty well with it. It's easy to do when you have such great wine. I mean, seriously, this is a value. My wife Kristen and I, as you know, Kristen, we have this all year round as one of our favorite everyday reds.
Yeah, it is. And I'll tell you what, with Labor Day coming up, if anybody's planning to do a barbecue, this would be my go-to wine.
Bacon blue cheese burgers with this is our favorite.
Well, we're doing barbecued baby back ribs, so that's my favorite.
Very nice.
Okay, well let's move into the Bordeaux varietals. How am I doing for time?
You're perfect. You're great.
Okay. Sarah, I'd like you to show a couple of the soil sides if you could, and also some of the mountain, the hillside vineyard slides. So I think a lot of people really have come to appreciate and certainly understand or love Zinfandel from Dry Creek Valley. But really, when Dawn and I took over, I think one of the things we were most excited about was the opportunity to really highlight Cabernet and the Bordeaux varietals from this region. There were a couple of reasons why we felt that those varietals could really excel. And they have to do with the soil type here in the valley, as well as the topography. So we've got, particularly on the western and northern end of the valley, these beautiful kind of hillside vineyards. You can see the rolling, hillside picture that she just put up. And in some cases, our vineyards are at, up to 1,300 feet in elevation, which is fairly steep. There are a couple of our vineyards that are very, very steep. Of course, they're all handpicked. So that was one of the main reasons Dawn really started to focus our vineyard efforts on Dry Creek Valley, our Cabernet efforts on Dry Creek Valley. Secondarily to kind of the landscape or the topography is the fact that we have this diversity of soil types. And in the case of Cabernet, we have very high iron content in the soil. This photograph is a little bit difficult to see, but I think we have another one that actually shows the color of the soil, Sarah. And that high iron content translates into kind of red, rocky soils, particularly on the western slopes of the valley. And that seems to be where Cabernet just flourishes. Now, we also grow some Cabernet on the eastern benchlands of the valley, which is a slightly different soil composition. It's more of a decomposing sedimentary rock. Sarah, do you have the slide with the
we don't usually show it, so I'm gonna find it. I'll put it back up. Yeah, okay. I'll put it up in just a second.
On the soil on the eastern side of the valley is a slightly different composition, and that gives us a little bit. So we get these bright cherry tones from the western bench, the western slopes. We get a little bit more of a I don't want to say minerality, but maybe just a little bit more of what would be the word? A little tighter, not quite so, not quite the bright red cherry pie. Like I think of grandma's cherry pie when I think of the western slopes, and I think a little bit more kind of refined Bordeaux elegance when I think of the eastern side and the eastern bench. But the point is, we grow vineyards or we grow Cabernet on both sides of the valley. We also grow all 5 Bordeaux varietals. Oh, here we go. This is my soil one. And I think the picture just shows the color differentiation a little bit better. And the iron, you can tell the soil photograph on the left has that iron content, but it's also very rocky. So those vines struggle a little more. We get quite low yields. As I mentioned, they're mostly all hand-picked, hand-farmed. And then the eastern slopes, that's the middle soil type. And then on the far right, which we already tasted the Sauvignon Blanc, but that's where we grow our Sauvignon Blanc, is on the valley floor. And it's a very sandy, loamy, well-drained soil. It runs along the creek, the dry creek, which is not dry. It's sort of a little mini river, but it's very fertile. And so Sauvignon Blanc grows well there. In fact, we have to control the vigor with a lot of, with some leaf pulling, etc. But since we're talking about Cabernet, if you have it, I would suggest you go ahead and try this. Similar to our philosophy with Zinfandel, we are an advocate for Bordeaux blending. And so we have never produced a 100% Cabernet. So this is actually 82% Cabernet, 15% Merlot, and then 2% Cabernet Franc, 2% Malbec, and 1% Petit Verdot. And so back in the early days when my father was making the wines, he worked with Cabernet Franc and Merlot. When we took over, we recognized we needed to expand our blending options, and so we planted Petit Verdot and Malbec. And so we've got some, in fact, we make an amazing Petit Verdot and single vineyard Malbec, but always we produce a blend, and that's something that's unique to our winery. This is 100% Dry Creek Valley, so you get that lovely kind of bright cherry, a little bit of an earthiness to this wine, a little bit of sometimes Tim, our winemaker, calls it forest floor. I call it kind of an earthy, sort of dried, kind of just a dried herb characteristic. And then some really beautiful, for me, my nose picks up kind of dried rose petals and a little bit of a floral element. But these are very multidimensional Cabernets, quite different than Cabernet grown in other regions. And again, it gets back to that fabulous climate, warm, temperate climate with fog influence, and the soil types, and then the more steeper, more mountainous terrain where we grow our Cabernet. We aged this for about 17 months in French oak. And I think it's a lovely example of Cabernet from Dry Creek Valley. And I believe we're the only winery focused on 100% Dry Creek Valley, that is in distribution. So I really encourage people to try to, if it's a restaurant or a wine shop, to really have at least one wine from Dry Creek Valley, because Cabernet is kind of the emerging superstar from our region. Anything else on?
Well, Kim, I know that they have the little sample bottles, but did you want to mention the cork that would be in the bottle when they?
Oh, yes, gosh. So I don't even have I'm glad you have a picture. So one of the innovations at the winery that we have adopted for all of our cork finished wines, and in fact, we received a patent for it, is similar to our labels. We want to give as much information to the consumer as possible. And so it occurred to us that printing on the cork, the sustainable cork information, might have some value and interest for people. And so I started doing it a couple years ago. It's been about 5 years now. And we've adopted it for all the cork finished wines. And what people learn is the name of the the cork species, which you can see is Corcus tuber. We print the harvest date, and people learn that cork is a natural renewable product that helps protect the Iberian lynx and the Spanish imperial eagle. And that's another sort of fun thing, factoids that you can learn about when somebody buys a bottle of our wine. So the last wine we're going to taste together is the Mariner. So I'll just step back and share a little bit about the Mariner and the origins of it. So our winery, as I've said 10 times already, advocate for Bordeaux blending. We actually produced the very first wine labeled as Meritage back from the 1985 vintage. My father and I were both involved in the Meritage Association, which was a group of people who got together to run a contest to come up with a synonym to define wines blended in the Bordeaux tradition. When that term was adopted or selected, and it combines merit and heritage, so it is Meritage, even though a lot of people like to say Meritage, but we quickly put that on the label. And we still produce a fabulous Meritage to this day. When we took over from my father, and I was saying, we really started focusing heavily on our Bordeaux program. We believed that we wanted to produce kind of an even grander style of Meritage, if you will. And so the Mariner was the wine that we introduced back in 2004. You're tasting the 2017. And this is a wine that highlights really our expertise and our investment in Bordeaux, varietals from Dry Creek Valley. One of the signature vineyards is our own estate vineyard called the Endeavor Vineyard. Everything we do is nautically termed. But this is really the kind of the flagship Bordeaux style blend. It's the most artistic wine that we produce, in that my winemaker Tim has given carte blanche to come up with the final blend. We've tended for the last number of years to sort of focus on more of a Cabernet-driven wine. This actually happens to be 65% Cabernet Sauvignon and 16% Merlot, and I believe 10% Petit Verdot, and a little bit of Malbec and Cab Franc. But it has varied anywhere from 50 to say 65, even on up to 70% Cabernet. So it is definitely Cabernet-driven. It's got some dark, rich, powerful characteristics. You'll notice it has a little bit of tannin. It's a little bit more structured than our Cabernet that you just tasted a moment ago. I get a little bit of mocha, or even like a little dark chocolate. A little bit more, the fruit tones for me are deeper and more brooding, a little more cassis, etc. But this is a really, really great example of how Dry Creek Valley fruit expresses itself in a Meritage style wine. So I see a question popping up, something about Hungarian oak. Is that?
Yeah, asking how does Hungarian oak influence the wine?
So we don't use Hungarian oak in the Bordeaux varietals. It's primarily for Zinfandel. We use several different types of oak in Zinfandel. Hungarian, we do a little bit of Yugoslavian, a little bit of American. And, but actually, probably more interestingly, is the fusion barrel that we developed, that we actually kind of invented for our heritage vine Zinfandel. And the fusion barrel incorporates some Hungarian wood in it. And it's actually a barrel that Tim worked with our cooper to create. And it's got French oak heads, and then the staves are a combination of different European species. I think the Hungarian oak maybe, and again, this would probably be a better question for Tim to really drill into, but in my experience tasting through those barrels, there's a little bit more maybe spiciness, a little bit more spice tones, but in a soft way. Our wines, we don't advocate or kind of go after highly oaked wines. It's just not our thing, never has been. So in the case of the heritage vine Zinfandel, that fusion barrel is a really great blend of various species of wood that don't overpower and dominate the more delicate aromas of Zinfandel. So Hungarian happens to be just one of them. I wish I could get some feedback. What do you guys think? Anything? Can you unmute everybody? Is there a way to hear some feedback? No.
And
okay.
Please feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself to join in on the conversation, give any comments on the wines, or even throw out some questions. Again, you can throw any questions in the chat function, but feel free to unmute.
I guess no questions is not a bad sign. Well, if there aren't any questions, I hope I've piqued your interest in Dry Creek Vineyard. I appreciate your time and attention, and we're a really special winery here. We really are, and it's not that we weren't making good wines in years past, but I think we're making truly great wines today, and we are absolutely committed to doing everything to keep that up. So I want to leave kind of the parting message is that I don't want you to worry about the 2020 vintage. Joe and Dan and the folks at Glunz know us. You may not know this, it's kind of a cool tip. I think we figured out you're our longest distributor partner in the country or close to it. I think your father met my father in 1970, it might have been 1973. And so suffice it to say, Glunz has sold many, many vintages of Dry Creek Vineyard. And they know us well, and they know me well, and they know that we will not put out a product that is not stellar. So we are doing everything we can to make sure this vintage is just as good as all the others. it could be that we end up with a little less fruit, a little less wine. That's okay. I don't mind. I don't care. It's about putting out a consistent, high quality, delicious wine, you know, that is authentic and stands out in the marketplace. And we've worked too hard for too long to sacrifice and compromise on that, you know, that particular mission. So don't worry about the vintage. So far, so good. We're testing everything. And while it's probably added a few extra gray hairs to my hair, and actually probably more so to poor Tim and Brian, our assistant winemaker. We're doing a lot of stuff, you know, there's a lot of extra work involved. So for example, a lot of sorting in the vineyard, hand picking. One of the things about harvesting is you want to try to avoid any kind of skin, you know, minimize skin contact and avoid leaves, you know, bringing in leaves into the crusher. So there's a lot of extra sorting and attention and, you know, just a manual labor to make sure that everything we bring in is clean and perfect. And so we're doing our due diligence. So I appreciate everybody's time and hope you guys have a great day, and maybe you all can come visit someday, or I can come to see you.
Well, we all look forward to both of those, coming to visit you and you coming back to visit us. We always enjoy both. I want to applaud you and your team with the no exceptions. It is fantastic wine every year, and it is always been a pleasure to see every vintage increasing in quality and definition and in delivering, over-delivering. So, Kim, congrats again to you guys. I did want to do a couple little quick things about the tasting hall. I wanted to share a few things. Everyone that is participating today is getting an opportunity. We have our current, at every tasting that we've done, Kim, you've been to a number of them. The fall tastings, we always have the catalog. Catalog's got some great pricing in there. Most of it from Case One, which is really great. And we were talking about before we started today, how back in the old days, we actually had tasting pricing you had to use the day of the tasting. So in kind of a great idea that came up with a couple of our sales guys, they had recommended bringing that back. So we actually have, for everyone who participates all day today, and only for you, we have special pricing that is going to be shared with you via email, as well as through your sales reps for these wines. That will be shot to you as an email, a special sheet. You all received all the tech sheets today. Apologize about the background shooting up there, but you have tech sheets on each of the different wines. That sale price that you have on there, the 3-case sale price, that is from Case One for the whole month of September. But for today, for participants, you'll get special pricing even better than that, just for you guys. And one of the cool things is that in order to be able to make it very simple for you to order, we have a new system that we kicked off on September 1st, just a couple days ago. It's DSD Link. This is our online ordering platform, which you can jump on the internet, on the great interwebs, or even better and more advanced, you can download our app, the DSD Link app, and that app will allow you to be able to log in and not only be able to find any different wine that you're looking for when you're done with your processing your orders at 8 o'clock at night, or trying to figure out how to fill in those orders for tomorrow. You can go ahead and place those orders. You can also see past orders you've done. You can find new products, all researched right on this site, as well as being able to see via GPS. You can see where your delivery is and where you're set up on the order for your driver for those deliveries that day. Almost better than Amazon. But anyway, so we have that fun segment. The other thing I wanted to share with everyone is that we also have, as part of this tasting hall, we have some, as I mentioned, our favorite wineries that we are hosting here in our virtual tasting hall. And we have a great list of some of those great wineries, including obviously Dry Creek today. Tomorrow we'll have Wednesday, we'll have Raptor Ridge, a brand new producer from the Rhone Valley, Broti Winery. Broti has got a lot of Chateauneufs, Côte d'Rône, and a lot of other cool things they'll be presenting from Chateauneuf. Then we have next week going to Italy and France and the Languedoc, and then back to Italy. So we got a great lineup here, and hope that you're able to make as many as possible. Please go ahead and sign up with your sales rep, or just shoot a call to the office and we'll get you signed up and get you out, as we did today, these fantastic sample bottles. So thank you everyone for coming. We do have a drawing, Kim. I think John Doxson mentioned to you, we're giving out the award for today. We're actually, just like yesterday, these wineries just keep kicking the stuff up for you. We're going to be giving away a Magnum of the Mariner to one participant from the morning session and another one for the afternoon session. So one of you guys will be winning. We had actually had Tim Campbell, who was on yesterday, actually is on today, and he was a winner yesterday. So, and he just found out tonight, this morning. So anyways, lots of fun things with the tasting hall, Glunz Tasting Hall. And Kim, Sarah, I can't believe how great you are consistently on this. John Doxson, who was on here briefly and is staying silent, but he'll be in for the afternoon session. Thank you guys very much.
All right, take care, everybody. Thanks. Have a great rest.